Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Purple Political Breakdown. How's it going? How's your day been? We are back at it again. And today we have another open panel, a conversation of the most important issues of the week. And of course, you got yours truly and my fellow guys here, my fellow co-hosts here who are joining the conversation, and Danny and Draken. How you guys doing? Introduce yourself.
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Riddell?
Doing well. How you doing, Draken?
I'm also doing well. It's nice to be here.
All right. So, if people don't know, these open panel conversations are eventually going to be something that I want to open up to the broader community, but it's going to be a process. If you ever want to join the conversation and feel like you can conduct a discussion in a productive manner, feel free to let me know, and then we can talk and see if we can set something up, and you can join into these discussions. New kind of style than how you were usually recorded, using this other program. I don't really like the screen because it's like us top three on the top. It's very small, but you know, it is what it is, I guess. I don't know how to change that. I'll probably try to figure out throughout the conversation. But today, we're focusing on the conversation of free speech. It's been attacked, so to speak, which is crazy since it's something that is core to what the United States of America is supposed to be built upon. So we'll kind of start the conversation regarding the Jimmy Kimmel stuff. So what do you guys know about this situation? What's your perspective on what's going on with Jimmy Kimmel?
Well, my perspective on the Kimmel situation is it's really messed up. I mean, I'm really glad that he got brought back. He didn't say anything that bad about Charlie Kirk. He actually didn't really insult Charlie Kirk at all, and didn't say that he deserved to get killed. He said that effectively Trump is trying to use this as an opportunity to gain political points, and he's going to use this to exploit the left, or to take down the left. And what ended up happening is ABC just ended up cutting him. And that, in my opinion, is complete crap. But the funny thing is, ABC knew that what he said wasn't. Apparently, there's leaked memos, at least from the board meeting, where they said, "Yeah, we know Jimmy Kimmel didn't say anything that bad, but he also insulted Donald Trump by saying Donald Trump doesn't care about Charlie Kirk. He's only using this to benefit himself." Um, I'm glad he finally got brought back after all of this pushback from the audiences, from the people who watch ABC, getting mad about Kimmel being removed. But at the same time, it really does kind of remind you, like, how these, corporate overlords almost are making all of these very strong decisions that can just silence speech very easily because they're afraid of getting a certain amount of backlash from Donald Trump or the Republican Party, and it's pathetic at this point.
Yeah, I completely agree with your assessment. It's just a total attack on free speech. Anyone who doesn't toe the line for the Republican Party or for MAGA is in the sights of Donald Trump, and he has so much power to pressure whoever he wants that, face the consequences of not kissing the ring,
I think it's appropriate
exactly.
to look at what the First Amendment says, right? Shout out constitution.congress.gov. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. It's always good to have that stuff out. And I'm also going to read off his quote, what Jimmy Kimmel said. He said, "We hit some new lows over the weekend with MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it." So, I mean, I completely agree when it comes to your characterization, both of you. And it's crazy to me that this is even a conversation because for the last couple of years, the dialogue has been oh, the left and Democrats are trying to censor us. Oh, they're trying to attack our freedom of speech. Here's the big term that they love. They hate cancel culture. And I don't see what is more cancel culture-y than canceling a guy and getting him fired from a TV show because he said something you guys don't like. And I agree that he wasn't saying anything like crazy by any means, because they were 100% trying to score political points. That's what they've been doing the last 2 weeks, trying to score political points with this Charlie Kirk stuff. And when they said like they're trying to characterize him other than what one of them, that's also very correct, because the campaign for the longest since this all happened was he's trans, he has leftist ideology, he's this and that, Democrats, and so much of it has been lies, but they're not getting pressured for it. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about that orange man that's been pushing those lies. So it's crazy to me that we've reached a point where the people who were bitching and moaning for so long about cancel culture are now doing cancel culture.
I mean, yeah, that's objectively what's going on. It's incredibly ironic. Of course, Trump supporters never want to see it that way and won't. They'll always come with some justification as how it's not cancel culture. And for them, it's only cancel culture apparently when oppressive when they say something racist. But in this instance, it's quite literally the same. It's not really the same thing. Kimmel said nothing racist. He didn't even say anything offensive again. He merely critiqued Donald Trump on his politics, and now he's going to use it. And immediately got canceled for it. So it really shows you how, okay, if you wanted to say that the left, for example, in the past was canceling people for things they said when they were 13 years old on the internet playing, Call of Duty or whatever. Okay, yes, I agree. That's really stupid to attack people for that. And try to ruin their lives over something they did when they were 13. But then if we're going to fast forward to now, and this is a fully grown man who said a very sensible thing criticizing his government, something that he has been doing for years, that other show hosts have been doing for years, etc. And you're going to say, oh no, that's too far. That guy needs to be canceled. That just shows you how this is slowly going to eat away at all of our freedoms as Americans. And it's also going to, potentially eat away at freedoms in other countries as well, given the fact that there are other political ideologies that are very closely related to Trump, in like Europe, for example. So it just basically shows that it's just going down a totem pole. It's no longer just you say something objectively offensive, like I hate women or whatever. Now it's, oh yeah, I'm going to say that Donald Trump is a bad person, and then you get canceled because you can't say that about the president. Like, well, why is that? That makes absolutely no sense.
I agree too, and I do think it's good to kind of like find a level of common ground so people understand like where you lie in this conversation. Because I've always been against, to an extent, cancel culture. Like there are certain things that we'll talk about because that is the new talking point with Google getting brought up and saying, and they're having the conversation on censorship in terms of misinformation regarding COVID-19, for example, and the fraudulent election. So we'll talk about that and how that is meaningfully different than this scenario, of course. But 100%, the whole idea of like canceling people for what they've said to teenagers, man. I mean, I'll be honest, I've said some terrible things when I was a teenager. I've said some diabolical things. Like my language then versus now is very different. But at the same time, like the idea for like a private institution and like people trying to cancel people is like more of a personal thing and honestly never had any weight. Like people can say they're canceling you. You can just turn off the internet. This is a whole different beast because this is the government pressuring private institutions and pressuring people. The First Amendment was created for people to kind of express how they feel like, But the core behind a lot of the amendments that people often forget is that it is created so we have protections against the government. And the government putting pressure on these businesses, the government and the most powerful person in the world trying to cancel someone is way beyond anything you can compare this to in terms of any example of cancel culture. I don't know. I don't care if it's like Kevin Hart. I don't care if it's Celebrity X. I don't care if it's James Cameron. No example you can give me from the past of these people can compare to the President of the United States trying to get someone fired. It is night and day in terms of severity, for sure.
Yeah, and I just like to state one more thing with that. Um, Cancel culture is, for the most part, in the social sense, always existed. Because when you get down to it, like we always engage in cancel culture. I just want to first point that out there. Every person I'd say does that to a certain extent because you hear opinions you don't like, and then you say, "Okay, I'm not going to associate myself with that person ever again," or whatever. In that sense, we're constantly canceling each other. The First Amendment basically says the government can't do anything to you, but doesn't say that there aren't going to be consequences for the things you do or say. You say something stupid, and suddenly people say, "Oh yeah, we don't want to have this guy on our talk show." That's very different than you saying something that's just a critique of the president, even if it's a brutal critique of the president, and then being told, "Oh yeah, you said that. Now we need to make sure you can never express your voice again, and maybe even face federal charges." I don't know. It's pretty messed up. You could use the argument, however, that Trump didn't technically do anything to Kimmel, but the pressure was there. So I still think it's extremely concerning, and it definitely shows that they don't actually respect free speech.
Right, because there's the argument that the First Amendment actually only prohibits Congress from passing laws that would do such a thing. But I think that the spirit of free speech, even if there wasn't a violation of the law of free speech protections, I think the spirit of free speech is that you can speak your mind in America about the political goings on in America without fear that the President of the United States or the FCC chair is going to force you to stop talking.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
I just also want to say I had kind of an interesting conversation tonight with a guy about this. And he was basically saying that the what's it called? That the U.S. government, or not the U.S. government, that conservatives nowadays are actually the people we used to call liberals, at least in the United States. He was arguing that Democrats are the conservatives now, and that Republicans are not liberals, but like reactionaries, which I would describe them as. And the reason the Democrats are is because the Democrats are trying to preserve things like the First Amendment. The Democrats are trying to preserve things such as how the different institutions in our democracy are supposed to function so that Trump does not gain too much power. And you even see this in other countries as well going on. But it's a little ironic that now it's in a way the left, which usually has been on the side of being progressive or at the very least against conservatism, is kind of being the conservative group when you think about it for a second.
Yeah, we are in a very weird place in terms of like the political spectrum and how things are aligned. It's very confusing. That's why I'm like, I don't really care about all these titles. I'm just trying to not allow this orange man to destroy my country. That is kind of my focus as of right now. But it's even beyond the Jimmy Kimmel stuff because you're right. He didn't do anything actionable necessarily. But there's a lot of like unspoken soft pressure that he puts on with a variety of things that not only he says, but he does in other kind of unconventional ways. Even before this, I've already made the case in numerous ways that Donald Trump has been trying to pressure these locations, these like media like companies, whatever. For example, when he does like the numerous lawsuits where he's saying, "Oh, you said this about me, I'm gonna try to sue you." There was a recent agreement. There was like a settlement for one of them. I forget which one exactly. Maybe you guys remember the exact media company where it was a settlement. But in its entirety, a lot of his settlement or a lot of his lawsuits mean nothing. Like there's really not much substance behind him, behind what he's trying to do. He just doesn't like what they're saying about him, and he's trying to find every small thing, whether it's the stuff regarding the Kamala Harris like interview and where he was pissed about that, or regarding the stuff regarding his sexual misconduct, where they said this word even though he has sexual misconduct in his charges. And now he's saying he's going another step further where he's talking about, and he has to realize, I hate when people say this, it's like, oh, he doesn't mean this, or who cares if he said that. He's the most powerful man in the world, leading the United States of America, and he's saying comments like 97% of publicity of those media companies should get their license revoked. That's just insane. And then let's never forget, of course, that he's going to try to help his buddies get richer too. Hey, you got to really understand a lot of the things he does back end when it comes to his tariffs, and when it comes to trying to cut rates and cut taxes. They're helping very specific people. So there's a lot of benefit if you're a very rich man to appease Trump regarding his behavior. So yeah, he's aggressive. He's not directly going like, oh, I want to take free speech away, but he's doing these other things that kind of coalesce to the idea that he's attacking free speech.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in 2016, when he was first running to become president for the first time, he literally campaigned on the idea of opening up the libel laws for anyone who wanted to print fake news about him, right? This has always been part of his game plan of attacking the media that's critical of him. He said it again in 2018 while he was president, and then Project 2025 also had the idea of opening up libel laws, allowing the president to attack anyone publishing false or negative news about him. This was always part of the plan, and this is always something that I've essentially been afraid of happening as far as Donald Trump has been in politics.
Yeah, and it's a big reason why you see people constantly comparing him to a dictator and saying this is how a dictator acts. I mean, you can't even downplay it at this point. The guy is clearly assaulting free speech by saying this stuff. He's trying to normalize it. I guess a good way of putting it is I like to use this term a lot, maybe I use it too much, but it's an example of plausible deniability in terms of his speech. So effectively, what he's doing is he's saying, "Oh yeah, I don't like this. I don't like the fact." He's basically saying, "I don't like this guy. Like you guys shouldn't listen to him, and people should take him off the air, etc." And then by saying that, he's can then plausibly denies that he never did anything to them legally. He did not touch their rights at all as president. It was just the companies that he put pressure on or threatened to cut contracts to, which might or might not be technically legal, that are going to suffer for this. So then they feel pressure to take him down. And the final thing I want to point out with the whole libel lawsuits and everything, he knows he's not going to win. As you were bringing up, Riddell, there's no substance in it. He's just trying to destroy those people's lives. It's basically court fair or court warfare, where you just get somebody caught up in the courts, paying for lawyers so they can fight back against Trump's lawyers, even though it is so obvious that they're going to win. But the point being is and Trump knows that, the point being is afterwards they'll be poor. They'll spend their entire life savings maybe if this is going on for a long time, or they might have to take out another mortgage on their house, whatever. Point being though is I'm just trying to screw this guy over economically. I'm not going to get anything out of it. I just don't want people. I'm just trying to scare people, effectively saying if you do this to me, I'm going to have you waste a bunch of money on court fees.
Yeah, it's this man, although I think he's a brain dead moron when it comes to running the country, he knows how to do the authoritarian stuff. He knows, hey, he got the full plan of action. Shout out Project 2025, helping him kind of dictate all the ways to kind of enact his power. When it comes down to this stuff, it also dawned on me, because I don't know how much you guys follow this conversation that's also going on. And it's like comparing the value of free speech, because I already mentioned how the president pressuring you versus like some random social media account and a bunch of people like who have like no pictures on their profile picture, they night and day in terms of value. And there's another comparison that's being made regarding this content creator. His name is Destiny, and he went out, said some things on Piers Morgan. For me, I hate Piers Morgan personally because I think he's a fake moderate. So when it comes down to it, they were trying to attack Destiny for not condemning what happened. Now, I've made my position very clear when it comes down to this. Condemn the attack and then cook the double standard. Very easy, very simple thing. Cook the double standard. But it's interesting how Donald Trump could say all these things that were like, not like, but they were lies. There was no actual evidence on some of the claims he was making about the shooter, who they are, their affiliation, their identity. All of that was conjecture. All of that was just stuff that he probably saw on Truth Social. He says it, no backlash, because MAGA will never pressure Trump. But obviously we got these circumstances where this content creator says something that he doesn't condemn it, but I've heard him say like other things on like he doesn't think this person should have done that. He should have got the death penalty, whatever. And then we got other personalities, other people who are just normal working people who are also getting pressured for saying certain things about Charlie Kirk, who are losing their jobs, who are getting attacked for it, who are people saying they should. I've heard people say they should get deported. I've heard that type of conversation in terms of, oh, why you didn't praise Charlie Kirk? And from my perspective, when I've heard a lot of people's what they're saying about Charlie Kirk, which I agree to, and we've had this conversation, you can condemn what happened to Charlie Kirk. Assassination is never okay. Zero tolerance for that. Charlie Kirk is still not a good person. Like, I don't have to pretend that this guy was an angel. But the people who are basically saying that, they're the ones getting attacked by MAGA. They're the ones who are going like, lose your job, deported, you're a terrible human being, you should be canceled. So it's interesting that it's not only Jimmy Kimmel, who actually lost his job, the high profile case that is Jimmy Kimmel, but other people are getting attacked for it as well. What do we think about this?
I find it absolutely abhorrent. It's again a form of censorship, and it is whether these companies feel pressured or these are people who are just MAGA who are running these small companies, feeling the need to who are just trying to protect their ideology. The point being is they are destroying free speech by firing people for having these negative opinions about Charlie Kirk. And, even if, I mean, going off with free speech, if you are a true defender of it, like the Republicans claim, then I'll be completely honest. They should not have a problem with somebody saying, I am not against Charlie Kirk being assassinated. For example, I'm not saying now, I just am using that as a theoretical opinion here. I'm not saying I support Charlie Kirk being assassinated. I don't. I think it's be true. I think it's been horrific for the country, his death. But with that being said, this is basically just slowly going down this road of at some point the Republicans or Donald Trump is going to feel is going to have the ability, the political ability to take away people's free speech rights simply because enough Americans are effectively already starting to do it for him. I.e., we have these companies saying we're going to fire you because you said bad stuff about Charlie Kirk. And then Trump's going to look at that and say, hey, look, I have the political capital. I can do this. I'm going to crack down on criticisms against national heroes. And one of those specific national heroes is now going to be Charlie Kirk, for example. And that starts to seep into our regular lives.
I'm trying to put him on a dollar coin. Yeah, right. Heck no. Dragon, you wanted to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, so at my university, I'm still in college, I'm not going to say where, we had a professor who posted something not so nice about Charlie Kirk in the aftermath of his death, who was fired for that,
Wow.
lost her job. So And it gets worse, believe it or not, because there was a staff meeting, a faculty meeting, to basically talk about, hey, if we can lose our jobs for posting things on Facebook, right? Where is the line, right? And they brought in the chancellor to give some statement about like, hey, what are we allowed to say? What are we not allowed to say? And the chancellor's response was basically just, if there's enough public pressure, you could lose your job. Which is incredibly just like dystopian almost, to say like, oh, these educators for higher education, right? They have to be policing their speech based on what a politician might like or not. But like it weakens our trust in the institution of like academia just across the board.
So someone said in the audience that there's a difference between posting not nice things and justifying the murder, isn't it? And I do think there's probably lines where it's like this person is a detriment to society. Like for example, we had the conversation regarding the Jubilee incident, where it's like that guy was the fascist that debated Mehdi Hassan. Like that guy had some very crazy and radical ideology. So there's probably a line, and we can probably kind of correlate it to ideology that, if spread, could be very dangerous for society. When it comes down to the examples that I'm aware of, I don't think I've heard a single person justify the murder. I think every person I've heard condemned the violence, but just called Charlie Kirk a terrible person. Now, if you want to go a step further in terms of the conversation, in terms of like how we got into this kind of political tense scenario, you can talk about that, because I think it's important to talk about, because that is the current climate we are in. Talking about the current toxic nature, the current divide between the two sides, the rhetoric from not only the left but also the right. You could talk about that. I don't think discussing that or talking about Charlie Kirk's behavior that led into that and inflamed that even further, I don't think that's justifying it. That's creating an astute analysis on what has caused our current situation. Now, if someone said he deserved it or something, I mean, that's kind of crazy. Saying someone deserved a political assassination, I feel like more than likely you probably should get fired for that. But I don't know many examples where that's the case, and a lot of examples that I've seen were examples of people who've always condemned the violence. But ultimately, yeah, there's probably a line where justifying someone killing someone else is, depending on the context, is probably not okay, I would say. You guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, again, I mean, it depends on, are we talking about the government getting involved, or are we talking about private businesses, whatever. Yeah, you do have a fundamental First Amendment right to, for example, say Charlie Kirk deserved to get murdered. Government can't do crap to you about that. I mean, I've even seen people. I mean, we even had, Charlie Kirk even said that he hopes that Joe Biden, who was then the sitting president of the United States, gets executed, effectively. Like, it's ridiculous. The question is, though, can a private business fire you? I mean, I would not want a guy to work for me if he was going around trying to justify political violence at a time like this. But still, that is the case, ultimately.
Yeah, and again, to touch upon what you're saying, Noam, and Lenny, you requested to be up. I decided, like, this is open. People can come up. These are called open panels. But in terms of what you're saying, Noam, any examples you find people who are saying nasty things about Charlie Kirk? I've always condemned them, but I'm not. Those are not the examples I'm talking about. Just because you can find circumstances of people being terrible pieces of garbage does not correlate to you canceling other people who are not doing that. So I'm focusing on the people who are expressing their freedom of speech properly. And Danny's completely correct. At the end of the day, no matter what people say, the government stepping in is never okay. For the most part. Like, obviously, very, 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 very few exceptions. Private businesses, they can do what they want to do, but at the same time, you also cannot complain about cancel culture or woke culture or all that stuff if all it takes is public pressure. Then when it happens on the left, when some guy talks about, calling some black dude an N-word and then he gets fired, then you can't complain and cry about cancel culture. So that's the biggest thing at the end of the day. We're talking about circumstances of people who are just speaking out on Charlie Kirk being a negative influence. We're not talking about people who are justifying his murder. But to kind of continue this whole thing, when it comes down to this situation, Jimmy Kimmel is back. He is returned. I don't know how this is going to go because I've heard some other different things that there's still certain people associated with ABC that still don't want him aired on their program and all that stuff. But obviously got a show back in relatively quick time. And it looked like the idea of trying to cancel him just didn't work. What do we think about him returning? Will you have something to say, Draken?
So it is true that he got his show back, but there are many ABC local stations that will not be airing it because there's a media group that owns these local stations that essentially said that they will not air Jimmy Kimmel live until he issues a public apology for his statements about Charlie Kirk. So even though he does have his show back, that doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to be on the air everywhere that it was before.
I also heard, and I believe this is a credible source, I also heard that some people were asking for him, at the very least on social media, or asking for him to donate to Erica Kirk and donate to TPUSA to get his job back. Crazy standards. Just imagine if that worked the other way around. But yeah, the pressure's still there, and it's tough. At the very least, he got his normal job back, but definitely reach went down. I don't know how this is going to play out moving forward. What do you think, Danny?
I mean, I think it's going to come to an end, especially when it comes to, well, in terms of this specific case here, it's going to come to an end when I think those like local stations, for example, and ABC starts facing more and more pressure from shareholders and people who are watching their channels. I think people will start to say, okay, we're not going to watch ABC. We'll go, watch things on different streaming services, which is already happening right now in the first place. Like these cable networks are going to die within our lifetime. I would even be surprised in the next 10 years or so they're gone, given how fast things are moving. But the point being is like the money talks in the end, and even if these people are big Trump supporters, they're going to have to give in to the fact that people want to watch Jimmy Kimmel on these smaller, like from these local senders for ABC, and if they're going to lose investments and people are going to stop watching ABC overall, that's going to cause their revenue to go down. That's going to cause them to say, okay, we'll put Jimmy Kimmel back on the air. I think it's going to be a bit, and that's effectively it at this point.
Okay. Hello, Lenny. Lenny, is that how you say it?
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I do want to let you know that this is recorded and it is going on my podcast. So just letting you know.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess I'll give a contrarian view of what's been said with regard to Jimmy Kimmel and what the FTC chair said, Brendan Carr. I don't think there's anything issue with it. I think governments. Well, first of all, Jimmy Kimmel wasn't some guy on some random street saying what he thinks. He's on a cable show. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I was having connection issue. He's on a cable show with airwaves that's licensed from the government, and there's some, I believe, in the view of Brendan Carr, the FTC chair, the FCC chair, there's some obligations and duties when people use the airwave and then they give statements. You know, you can't just say whatever you want on cable. It's not like you're standing on some street and protesting some government or saying whatever it is that you want. There's some things that you can't say. And now his view is that whatever Jimmy Kimmel said, I guess he was saying that the Charlie Kirk shooter was like a mega person instead of like a left wing person, which I think based on the media so far, based on the official statements, is misinformation. That's very unlikely to be the case.
Well, that's
So
not
in his view,
exactly what he said. He was mostly kind of commenting on MAGA's approach on what is going on and saying that they're trying to make it seem like he's not one of them. He wasn't calling him
right.
MAGA. He was just saying that that's what MAGA is
But
doing.
I think
Those are completely different scenarios because it's a characterization of what a side is doing versus making a claim yourself about who the attacker is.
I think the way he said it, it comes off at least to many people that he was saying that the shooter was like a MAGA person instead of who he is based on the media reports and the official statements. But I mean, look, I think like for example, like Biden officials. So I think a few days ago, I think yesterday, Google came up with the news that Biden administration was pressuring them to stop some information, to stop quote unquote misinformation about COVID on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So they were essentially pressuring YouTubers or people on Google from expressing their view on what COVID is and the treatments and whatnot. I think government officials can and should be able to say, look, if we see a conduct that we're gonna take action and we think we have a right to take action, and if the Google or Disney or any corporation or really anyone disagrees with it, then they have to let the government take the action, and then they go to court and resolve the issue. This is not black and white, as in just because the government says we may take action to correct your conduct that we think is at best inappropriate, at worst, legal. I don't think that's like an infringement of free speech. I think it's just government saying we think we have a right to do to regulate this conduct that you're doing. We think that's unlawful, that's inappropriate with the obligation that you have. And if you agree, you can cease the conduct. And if you disagree, then we'll take our action and then we'll go to court and let the court settle it. I think it is not black and white settled law that what Jimmy Kimmel said on cable airwave, which is licensed from the government, is something that he is allowed to say. There are some, the FCC does regulate the airwaves and what's being said on these shows. Like they can't just show, like for example, pornography. Okay, that's just something that they have an obligation not to do that. There's a process for it in terms of I'm guessing depends on what type of license they apply for. They have to stick to that type of content and not veer off on whatever it is that they veer off to. So I don't think it's an infringement of free speech like people say. I think it's just a regular, normal government function that that how the system is supposed to work. Government says, look, we have a right to regulate this, and we're going to do it if you don't cease and desist. And then if you can cease and desist, or you don't do it, and then we go to court and let the judge decide, and then that's how it is. So that's how the system works. I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
So,
And also, back to your sorry, go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you think that there are
Go on.
guidelines that the FCC follows and that determine how they handle if people are taken off the air?
I don't know.
Well, they have guidelines, and it wasn't clear
Okay.
what guideline Jimmy Kimmel would have broken. And so, with that being said, the FCC chairman making the threat that they either need to pull Jimmy Kimmel off the air, or the FCC is going to have a lot more work to do. that is a threat to essentially revoke ABC's license without a violation of the guideline. That is a night and day difference from anything I've seen about Google and Alphabet, with like Biden saying like, hey, is there anything you can do to like clean up the misinformation on your sites? This is a night and day difference, because there are guidelines that were being followed that Jimmy Kimmel was removed off the air anyway, even while following them, versus there are no guidelines. Biden didn't make any threats. There was a request and Alphabet fulfilled it. This is like a night and day thing. I'm not sure
Well,
why
I
you
w-
would draw this
well, I
comparison.
was
Also,
well, I would
Sub-Zero
say
put
that.
a link in the chat. Let me know what that link was for, Sub-Zero, for sure. Before you respond, Lenny, do you want me to just call you Lenny? Is that all right?
Yeah, Linux fine.
Lenny, Danny wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Oh, that also doesn't really make any sense, because the FCC doesn't take you down for saying things political, for disagreeing um, with what a politician is doing or what the president's doing. The hosts have been doing this on cable television since the 1960s and 70s. I mean, we had footage during the Vietnam War of Village of Americans burning down people's houses on live cable TV, and that really helped spur people to no longer support the Vietnam War, for example. In Kimmel, the worst thing he literally said was that MAGA is desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything they can to score political points from it. And then in the meantime, you have like Fox News or other cable news shows going off and saying things like, when Obama was president, that Obama isn't even an American citizen, which is arguably as bad, if not far worse, than what's going on here. And if Fox News then did not violate FCC requirements and they were allowed to continue saying those things, even though there was no evidence backing it up, then why is it okay now for the FCC to step in and say, oh, well, this guy is saying that it's bad how Trump is trying to politicize this to spur up a bunch of discord within the United States and get Americans ready to fight each other? I don't see how that logic remotely follows.
Well, I guess my point is just that Brandon Carr obviously believes that he has the legal authority to correct the conduct that was on display by Jimmy Kimmel during that show. And he may be right, maybe he may be wrong, and I don't. It's like me trying to throw in a lawsuit against someone for something that I feel that he may have done that damaged me, and we can resolve. I could tell the person, look, you can stop doing that, or we have to go to court and we have to take action. And that's somewhat similar to me, because so if, for example, if it turns out that Brandon Carr carried out whatever the hard way is, which I guess people are assuming that is to take away the license, that will have to be settled through court. And if it's unlawful, as people think, then that's how it's going to be determined. But for government, I think government officials can and should be able to say, look, we have a conduct here that we think is at best inappropriate, and we think we can regulate it and we should regulate it. So unless that conduct is somehow changed.
But it depends on the scenario, right? Like, because I'm sure you don't want a government to just dictate our speech, right? You don't want the government telling us.
Generally, yes, but I also understand that there's always time and a place for things. Like Jimmy Kimmel wasn't some guy on some street yelling what he thinks. He's on a airwave, and I guess maybe there is some obligation as part of the license process of the airwave for him to not do or say what he did. And
Yeah,
as to what Fox,
there's an argument that can be made, and as of right now, there's a lot of very creative arguments that are being made when you have someone, a government official, the most powerful government official, pressuring you to act in a certain way. Now, the question is not whether or not he made an argument, because of course he did. It's whether that argument is valid. And in this situation, when it comes to Brandon Carr, and when it comes to what Sub-Zero is posting, there is no strong argument that what Jimmy Kimmel said was obscene, was indecent, or was profane. And Brandon Carr, one of the biggest things that he tried to use to insinuate that this was bad is he said that Jimmy Kimmel was intentionally trying to distort news information to the people. And obviously, when it comes to this situation, it wasn't a claim that he was MAGA, as I made earlier. It was a observation of MAGA Republicans' handling of the situation. Because a lot of their news cycle and the politicians and the President of the United States were pushing out information that had no corroborating evidence about the shooter. The only thing that we were hearing is that he was left, he was trans, all this other stuff. There was no evidence to any of the claims they were making step by step by step. Now they're getting more information and then eventually coming to a conclusion regarding leftist ideology is fine, but they weren't doing that. So he was making a comment about that action on how they were making predetermined claims about someone to create a narrative to attack the left and Democrats. And we've seen that perfectly embodied when Donald Trump went out, made a whole presidential speech with AI, and basically said that he was going to go after the radical left, the left, and the certain people associated with that. So creating that observation does not follow under the quota of the guidelines of what they are trying to claim Jimmy Kimmel did, which is why he got his job back.
I would also just real quickly like to chime in. If Brandon Carr does this to Kimmel, this is going to scare the shit out of news media companies around the United States and even potentially around the world who might be broadcasting in the United States. They're like, oh crap, okay, then we can't say anything bad about Trump without the FCC getting involved here and trying to take us down and us getting stuck in court fair, as I was saying before earlier. It's not even about does it actually succeed. Like even if Kimmel, for example, his case were to Carr were to lose in court. That doesn't really matter. Is the fact that now you're going to have a U.S. government who's going to go around and take anybody to court, any news anchor or whatever, and try to get that station removed from the waves every time they criticize President Trump. And suddenly you find yourself in a situation where, at the very least de facto, you live in a country that does not have a free press. You have a press that is only going to say positive things or just not even talk about the president or even the president's party, because they are afraid that they will be attacked by the president and their party. So I think that's the bigger concern. I'm not really concerned about, is this going to win? I'm concerned of, are they going to start doing this to other people too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, go ahead.
I just really, because Sub-Zero put some screenshots. I wish I had time to go through screenshots, because when you look at some of these screenshots for a lot of these people recently, the flip-flop is insane. So a couple of screenshots here from Sub-Zero. Shout out you. Brandon Carr said, President Biden is right. Political satire is one of the oldest and most important forms of free speech. It challenges those in power while using humor to draw more people into the discussion. That's why people in influential positions have always targeted for censorship. That's one of his tweets. And his other one is, free speech is the counterweight. It is the check on government control. That is why censorship is the authoritarian's dream. These are tweets by Brandon Carr. Interesting. But go ahead, Jack, and you mess it up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to agree that there's a chilling effect, right? If you were to start going after one person for speech for observations that they're making. Keep in mind, these are just observations, right? About saying, because earlier that day, before we had any information about the shooter, as far as MAGA was concerned, this was already a trans person that shot Charlie Kirk. And then when it came out that actually, no, the shooter wasn't trans, it was, okay, but the bullets had leftist slogans on them talking about like furries and stuff, right? And then when it was like, well, that's not really like a political message. It was okay, but they had a trans roommate, and that was like the whole thing, right? And like the story just changed time and time again when they realized like, oh, there's actually not enough evidence for this claim. They're like, well, there's this one other thing. And so when Jimmy Kimmel makes this observation of like, well, it seems like MAGA is doing everything in their power to make it seem like this shooter is anything except one of them, that's just an observation about their behavior. So if you're going to start going after Jimmy Kimmel for an observation that he's making, right? What's to stop you from going after anyone for making any observation that you don't like?
Yeah, it's kind of insane. But I did want to kind of the final like topic before we wrap up the podcast is the interesting. I'm glad you brought this up. Is comparing it to what the government does regarding like COVID and voter fraud election or whatever. So when it comes down to it, Donald Trump and the Republicans are making a big deal out of Google saying that the Biden administration pressured them, and they've already kind of they've already done this when it comes to Meta and when it comes to Twitter. So we've kind of already knew this, but the more wins, I guess, for MAGA, the better, because they need it. So I do think, and this is where the point where Lenny made was, I do think it's potent. There are times where the government probably should step in. Now, it's hard to figure out what that line is, but my very clear difference between the Jimmy Kimmel situation and the situation regarding voter fraud and COVID misinformation is if you're lying to people about taking the COVID vaccine, people will die. And as for voter fraud misinformation, people were lying about voter fraud and January 6th happened. So there is direct causal links to this information being improperly spewed that can affect society and people's lives directly. So that is kind of like the biggest thing, because when you're a government, you have to understand that you're here for the people. And if you know information is being put out there that can endanger the people, then you want to be very careful on, is this okay? Is this going to be dangerous rhetoric? Imagine someone puts out a claim out there and says something like, hell, all Asian people are full of this rare disease that if you talk to them, you will die in 20 seconds. The ramifications of something like that would be very dangerous for the Asian community. So there are differences between the two actions, but I'm curious what you, Danny, and Draken think.
I think we're definitely going to see within our lifetimes. I mean, you're already kind of seeing it to a certain extent in other countries, but you're going to see the government start trying to take a stance against some of this misinformation that's being spread on social media, et cetera. Um, and I don't know how it's exactly going to look. It'll have to be in such a way as to prevent outright, basically to protect national security is how I see it. How they're going to define that though is going to be really tricky. It's already not even like the NSA and various other intelligence organizations are even checking us out and making sure we're not, trying to like plot something or whatever. But I think there's going to be laws passed basically say if we can prove that you are intentionally trying to spread misinformation on the internet, then we will take you to court. Like if you 100% know that what you're saying is not true, it's like just propaganda from another country, for example. I could see where that would result in something, and I want to say it actually already is to a certain extent. Uh, but other than given the fact that, for example, we had those Russians arrested who were giving Tim Pool a bunch of money, uh, or at least they were being chased down. But we're going to be seeing that line get crossed, I think, within the next like 10, 20 years.
For sure. And Sub-Zero, you are correct. Misinformation is very hard to define. And I 100% agree, Danny. You have to, if you're going to make a strong case, you have to prove clear intent, which is the hardest part. Dragon, did you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think intentionality, right, is a pretty big point as far as like suing someone for slander or libel, right? So like you have to prove that they knew they were lying, and you have to prove that there's harm in their lie, right? Those are the two big parts of that. I think that going after people for misinformation would require similar standards. I think it's lying in a way that harms the public.
Say the last couple words you said
Oh,
again.
it's lying in a way that harms the public.
Well, okay. Even that one is tricky, to be fair, because you don't know if your lie
that one's
will. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, that one's tricky because, well, one, you may not know you're lying or so. The other big problem, because then you could start going around accusing anyone of lying.
Sure,
But
it,
the
it would be
other
knowing it.
challenge,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, this is stuff that's gonna be really hard to do, and I'm sure you already have people discussing this, lawyers, etc. But the other aspect of this is saying we're doing it to protect the public. Like that's kind of a thing that already all authoritarian dictators do whenever they do anything. They say like, oh, well, the reason why we're going and killing this group of people who disagree with us is because these people, by disagreeing with us, are a direct threat to the people, effectively. Like they always use this quote unquote democratic language to make it seem like, hey, we're going to attack you, or we're going to kill our enemies, or to try to throw them in jail. Um, and then they step back and say, because it's for the people. The people want us to do this, so we have to do this, etc. The Nazis did it a ton. Mussolini did it. Stalin, Lenin did it. Putin is doing it. Xi, etc. It's a very common trope. So that's a one concern is, if it's hurting the public or is it really just hurting you and you're using the public as an excuse?
sure. So there were 2 points there, so I'll respond to them in 2 points. The first being that proving intentionality is a high standard. I disagree with that. I think that intentionality, the idea of knowingly lying, right? That's every single libel case, every single slander case. This is something we already have baked into the laws concerning people lying in a way that harms others, right? And on the second point about how authoritarian regimes pay lip service to the idea of serving the general public, right? I mean, I think that there's an obvious distinction between paying lip service to such an idea and actually doing it, right? So, like, correcting COVID misinformation, right? This is a disease that's killing hundreds of thousands of people, right? I think pointing out, hey, actually, the vaccines are safe and people should go and get that. And these bots, right, that were paid for by Russian misinformation farms to push the idea that it's dangerous to the Republican Party, right? I think these are genuine harms that should be corrected. Whereas something that Putin might go after maybe would just be his political opponents, that he says this is a general harm that, I think that there would have to be a different standard for determining what is an actual harm to the general public versus not so much, and that can be separate from some government arm that would be enforcing these laws.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, ultimately, I probably disagree with I do think there's going to be a high burden, especially since it's going to be attached to the First Amendment. I do think that is going to be very huge, especially when the government is involved. That's going to be kind of the biggest part about it. Like if a private institution is putting out there and someone says, hey, spreading misinformation, you just report it, they can just ban them, block them, suspend them for a couple days, suspend your Twitch account for a couple days. That wouldn't be too hard. But when the government is involved, I think there is another kind of level of severity that they're kind of violating, because at that point the government's intrusion could be seen as violating a core right to an American citizen. So that one is going to be tricky because a private institution, in comparison, always has this kind of legal right to do whatever they want with you when you're on their platform. And I think people don't understand that oftentimes. They think that you can kind of just pressure and bully private institutions. No, they can just take your account away if you break their terms of service, which everybody signs when they make an account. But it is going to be very tricky now when it comes to the government and this current regime. The only time we've seen it when it comes to like the Biden administration was in regards to COVID and voter fraud misinformation that actually had very, very explicit harm. And at the very least, they can kind of connect certain individuals to like certain actions. Like January 6th, they have a whole track record of what the Proud Boys were doing and how that led into what most reasonable people call an insurrection. As for COVID misinformation, there are people who are just in the internet who just are in these bubbles of like just misinformation. They're in these MAGA bubbles where they just hear stuff and they don't know if it's true or right. Like, how many people hear Joe Rogan talk about horse tranquilizers and think he's correct? It's ridiculous. And there's something to be said when like popular influencers push out misinformation that can be harmful. Now, even those individuals, it's hard to kind of put any type of level of severity onto because they always use hedging language. They're saying, just my opinion. They're saying, I'm not telling you to do this. This is what I think. And you can't really... That also makes it very difficult to attach any level of severe blame onto them. Because it's not really about... It is about like the action, but it's also always about the precedent. Once you do this, a bad actor, could they use this to do something even worse? Let me read what you said, Sub-Zero, here in the audience. Say, we can't trust the government to censor, full stop. Our forefathers understood this, hence why it's the First Amendment. It's always going to be a current regime that controls the censorship. Not worth it. Ivermectin is a medicine made for humans, not that it's effective for COVID, but even the framing of that being horse medicine was bullshit. Nah, I think that was funny. So yeah, it's a kind of crazy situation. We're about to wrap up. Went about an hour talking about free speech. We talked about Jimmy Kimmel. We talked about how MAGA doesn't care about free speech anymore. And I hope more like I've seen some creators and like personalities like look at this and go like we're kind of going back on some of our core principles right now with this Jimmy Kimmel stuff. But I've seen other creators that go like, okay, it's okay to be a hypocrite. So I don't know how this is gonna play out, but I do think most Americans who are seeing this are going like, what the fuck? This is crazy. Any final words from you guys before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing Kimmel is back. And I also just want to say that I think all of this is going to be solved to a certain extent by people voting with their wallets, which if there's one thing Trump wants, it's this weird neo-capitalist society. And well, that comes with people saying, okay, well, we're not going to support the guys who are going to censor people.
Any final words for you, Draken? We're going to answer this question from Noam before you leave, though.
I just wanted to say I love free speech, and I love that I can criticize the president without fear of legal recourse against me.
Facts.
Please don't change that.
Don't come after me. I like free speech. I mean, to answer your question, Noam, what do you consider exactly MAGA, the non-establishment part of the Republicans, or just the social media activists? I think... How nasty do I want to be? Do I want to be fair? Do I want to be just disgusting? I think when it comes to MAGA, it's probably beyond the support of Donald Trump. Although I feel like if you support Donald Trump, more than likely you are under this category. But it's my understanding, based off of certain characteristics, is this undying belief that Donald Trump can basically do no wrong. It's the cult-like aspect of Republicans towards Trump that makes them MAGA. And I think most And it's not just a social media thing, because Republican politicians have turned against their own values and their own integrity to support unconditionally Donald Trump. And then there's MAGA loyalists who created a whole framework with like Project 2025, for example, that are basically generals of his cult. So it's the cult-like behavior, the unconditional support, the sacrificing of one's Republican values. Remember, I don't even know what a Republican is anymore. I used to respect Republicans. I don't know if they exist. Shout out Thomas Massey though. Shout out him. But that's kind of my general definition. It's the cult-like unconditional support for Donald Trump as Republicans, where he's on the forefront over the United States of America.
Yeah, I would consider, the Trump-like supporters of him as, or the cult-like supporters of him. At this point, though, it's also just kind of like the Republican Party is effectively the MAGA party. Whether they admit it or not, they just keep following him and doing what he says, and don't really give any pushback on anything he tries to do. Final thing I'd say also is that uh, I don't really think there are true conservatives or Republicans left in the party. A lot of them have either decided I'm not going to vote or are going and voting for the Democrats just so they can defeat the Republicans and cause Republicans to go back to being the true conservative party they used to be prior to this. Um, in other words, I've been talking to Europeans about this living here. The United States does not have a conservative party right now. We have a progressive party and we have a reactionary party, is how I put it. And you have some conservatives who either don't vote or they go off and they join the Democrats just so that they can get rid of the reactionary party in power currently.
I will say, shout out Thomas Massey. He's still pushing heavily to try to get that Epstein files out. So he has not let up on that one, regardless of what Donald Trump says about him. I used to really like Nikki Haley. Then she endorsed Trump, and I was like, "Oh, you sacrifice your values, damn it." That was tough. And is there any other Republican I can look at like? I used to like Doug Burgum, and he became a shill for Donald Trump. Chris Christie, I don't think has become a shill for Donald Trump, from my knowledge. But very few. They kind of they exist in the very small pockets of the Republican Party. Dragon Brown, say something.
I was gonna say, if you're looking for like alternative media people that are right wing but not part of MAGA, Richard Hanania is a good one. Possibly the
I
only
think I've
good one
heard that
left.
name before. Richard Hanania. I'll look into that. Shout out my Never Trump Republicans too. We got the Tim Millers, the Bulwark. My boy Counterpoints. Shout out. Far in
There's
between.
also Anthony Scaramucci or whatever. He, after working with Trump, became extremely anti-Trump. Oh, and John Bolton also is another example, who worked with Trump, is a Republican, and then now hates Trump, just keeps calling him an idiot.
He's cooking. All right, last thing from He said maybe it's inherent to the U.S. political system since you vote directly for a presidential candidate. We don't vote directly. We go through like a electoral college system. So they tend to develop a cult of personality around them. I think there's a mischaracterization. So technically I feel like you're correct. Because people think we vote directly for the president. So that's why. But we do have like an electoral college system. But regardless, you're still voting for the president, so I guess. I don't know. I wish it was that simple, but nobody cares about our local politicians at all. So it's just I think it's a weird framework on how we kind of put the presidency on a pedestal. What do you want to say something, Danny?
Yeah, no, I was gonna exactly what Dragon typed back. We vote for the candidate. The state. So the way it works in America is the state, like New York, votes for Kamala Harris. The majority of the population in New York votes for him or for her, and then afterwards, electors in what's known as the Electoral College go and cast a vote for her, and that counts as the votes for New York. Like this is who New York chose, um, which
Correct.
also then basically means that you can't like have these minority governments like really pop up as much like in other countries. So that's effectively what happens. So yes, you basically tell the guy in the electoral college, this is who I want to vote for, and then he does the voting for you. But it's weird because they can technically act on their own accord also. I think there was one electoral college guy in 2016, for example, who chose Gary Johnson, and Gary Johnson didn't even win any of the states.
Yeah,
Just to
I've
give an example.
I haven't heard about that. That's why I kind of phrase my characterization as like different in technicality, because most voters don't know how the electoral college works at all. So they just think, oh, I'm voting for Trump, or I'm voting for Kamala. So it is weird, but we'll see. That's why I also vote. I also advocate for voting reform too. People who are listening to my podcast. I don't know if I told Danny or Draken. I work with like different organizations that are trying to advocate for different voting reforms. So I heavily recommend people look into them, such as star voting, such as approval voting. These are more efficient voting systems that kind of bring more value to the vote. But with that said, appreciate everybody who came to the open panel. Appreciate everybody who listened to it via the audience. This podcast is happening every single Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. EST, and we'll cover the most important topic of that week. It's an open panel, so anybody's welcome to have the conversation, but I am a dictator in this space, so if you are being disrespectful, I will kick you off. So with that said, appreciate everybody who came in. If you're listening to the podcast, rate it 5 stars. If you want to join in the conversation, feel free to just contact me via my email, thetrendgoldenfaith@gmail.com. Y'all have a good one. Take care. And peace.